Hello, everyone who is watching live or watching on our recorded version. My name is Michael Hanton. I'm part of the Springboard team responsible for the GEMS programme. And today I'm bringing you not just two industry experts, but two also of our fantastic mentors on our scheme. Rather than me introduce them, I wonder if, Joe, you'd like to introduce yourself first and give us a little bit of background.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name's Jo Meredith. As it says, I'm an HR consultant. So I've got over 30 years experience within hospitality. I actually started washing up in a pub kitchen at the age of 14, and that was my sort of love into the industry. So I actually trained to be a chef. Wasn't a particularly good one. And I was working for the Compass Group at the time, who had a recruitment agency. So that led into my path into sort of human resources. So I'm now currently self-employed, and I work with many different clients within hospitality. But previous to being self-employed, I was actually lucky enough to be the HR director at the Ritz in London for nearly 15 years, so which was a great experience. So, but as I say, I'm self-employed now and freelance, and I do a mixture of HR consultancy as well as facilitating training and also leadership coaching as well. So.
Fantastic. And Simon, if you wouldn't mind.
That was so smooth. How do you follow that one? Yeah. Hi, good morning if you're watching live, or hello, depending on what time of the day that you're watching. Yeah, so my name's Simon, as it says. I work for a company called HIT Training. Very, very similar in terms of to Joe. I started my career actually hounding a little boutique hotel, basically saying that I wanted to have some experience. So they allowed me at 14 years old to do a bit of pot washing and some bed making. And then, let's just say, quite a few years later, here I am now. I'm working with a national training provider, and we deliver apprenticeship programs. We also deliver commercial programs for everything to do with hospitality. And I'm really lucky because I get to work with a wealth of huge experience from other people who've worked across the sector. And over the last few years, I'm really excited about this this particular topic, because the industry, so for education and also for the whole of the sector, has changed so massively. So talking about change should lead sort of quite swiftly into what we're about to talk about, I do believe, Michael.
God, that was so slick.
Wow. I thought this was an audition for MTV, but apparently that doesn't exist anymore.
So things are changing, no more MTV, but in terms of actual change, how do we cope with change? What are the kind of processes that we use to cope with change? Joe, I wonder if you could kick us off with that one.
Yeah, I mean, so change is very hard. I mean, we're creatures of habit. Our industry is seeing, the biggest change probably for many, many years. COVID has had a massive impact on the industry. Sadly, there's lots of redundancies, lots of people in the middle of like restructures and having their hours reduced, salaries reduced. So that's really hard. It's a massive change for people, and coping with change. I mean, if you link it back to the change curve, whereby you have that initial shock, disorientation, what's happening, you then sort of get into sort of the emotions. So that could be sadness, happiness, anger, so all those sort of emotions come out, and it's only once those emotions come out and have been aired that you can move on to the next stage of making the change happen. And during that process of making the change happen, it's really, really important, that employers are very transparent with people, with their teams, and managers talk to their teams and listen to their teams and have open conversations with their teams. And it's only once that's all been ironed out, can you then get to that stage of acceptance.
It's really interesting because, as Joe's saying there, is that we go through so many changes every single day. And I suppose, and for you guys who are watching this, who predominantly are at university, and you'll probably have attended a number of lectures, and you would have had different theories explained to you. And the change curve is when Joe and I were doing the prep for this, straight away, that's the first thing that both of us straight away came to our heads as a really good model to look at in terms of the whole curve and coming through the other end. So when you go from the denial at the beginning right the way through to sort of the end section, if you like, which is around sort of the decision, the integration in the business, how it's rebuilt. And there's lots and lots of different models and theories that you'll see throughout your studies. And I remember when I went to uni, one of the things that I was looking at, I was a little bit like, are you kidding me with all these theories? Really? But don't belittle what you find easy, because as your career progresses and as you go through the future, there are so many changes that you will have to go through. There are so many different things that you have to adapt to as you go along. And then by having these foundation models in your mind is really useful, because then it's how you can then apply them through anything. You know, a few years ago that, you know, where we looked at pubs going for no smoking, but right the way then you fast forward to now in terms of with COVID, which is a change that was forced upon people. So, you know, you can look at another theory. You look at Cotter and so John Cotter's the step changes in terms of with his theory, where you look at it's about the first stage of that is about creating an urgency. Well, an event like COVID-19, well, the urgency was created for all of us. It was stomped onto everybody. So that's been a big change for the sector that everybody's had to deal with, but didn't even actually have time beforehand to stop, think, and as Joe said, in terms of with the change curve of actually to go through sort of a denial. People would be like, well, what we have to shut our business tomorrow, and that, you know, there wasn't sort of a cut-off point or anything like that. So I think that it's really relevant for now in terms of the changes that we're going through. But I think that one of the key things to be looking at is, alongside with all of the models, is about being able to create a clear vision. If you're in a situation where you're looking at managing change in the future, you want to be able to create that urgency right at the beginning with your colleagues and being able to support them so that they can understand what's the threat if we don't make the change. How do you spark that motivation with your team and your colleagues to get them to want to do that? You want to get as many people involved. So you want to form a real powerful coalition of the people around you, and utilize all levels of the business to make sure you've got full 360-degree feedback, so that everybody's involved but is on point with what the vision is, what the mission is. So, and explain that process, explain those values, and then it's about communicating that vision out to the team. Like I say, we rewind a few months ago to COVID. It was kind of like all of those stages were pretty much missed, because the industry just had to make the change. But in a future context, I would highly suggest that you really just make sure when you look at the different models to actually for how you can go through that, and looking at constantly then reviewing what's happening, which is what's happening now across the sector, and looking at removing obstacles. I remember talking to the CEO from Burger King, and he was saying about from the day that they were told to close, the day after they were planning on, well, how are we going to reopen, and doing lots and lots of scenario bases of, well, if it looks like this is what we're going to do. If it looks like this part, this is what we'll do. But the end focus was always the same, which was we're going to have to change a variety of different things, put together a number of contingency plans, but how we execute them, that might change on a daily basis, and it still is now. You know, in certain areas, we're constantly having to change stuff. I'm sorry, Jake. You know what I'm like? I'm like rather on for ages and ages and ages.
I mean, some of the clients I work with, quite a few London clubs who reopened as of the 4th of July, and and already when employees came back, we did return to work inductions with them to go, so that everyone knew what the changes were going to be and how they'd be implemented. But already every day things are continually changing. It's a moving goalpost at the moment. But going back to what Simon was saying about theories, another theory to think about is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So when, you know, the base of that is about security, that loving and belonging. And when you're going through change, you need to do all the good things that Simon has just said to make sure that people feel safe and secure. Because also, if a lot of their colleagues have been made redundant, there's something called the survivor syndrome, whereby the employees that come back to work, you know, they're worried about their jobs. Is this going to happen to me in the future? You know, they're probably friends with some of the people that have been made redundant. So they almost feel a bit guilty that they're still working and their colleagues have been made redundant. So businesses and leaders have to sort of address that as well. So all these things that you're learning at university, whilst they're very, you know, theoretical, you know, you do put them into place once you're sort of working and in the workplace. And sometimes you don't even realise that you're doing it, and you don't realise that you're sort of going through that change curve.
Yeah, and especially in the people that you are going to be working with, and that's a really, really good point, Joe, around is that if you've not been made redundant, those people might feel slightly guilty about the fact that they're not made redundant and that they're still working, and it's the relationships that they've formed with their colleagues. And you're absolutely right, that whole tier in terms of the, you know, the foundations, you know, of feeling safe is that this in particular national crisis has caused in terms of with the fact of that it's a safety that no employer, no matter how big, how large, can physically turn around and say, you know, actually, no, this is exactly what we're going to look like in 6 months' time because of what's happening in the world. There are so many things that are taken out of our control. But I think one of the key things to always focus on, and our gaffer always says exactly the same thing, which is around just focus on what we can do. So, you know, there's sometimes it's really difficult. So absolutely, we need to put together all the plans in place. But one of the best things that I've ever done throughout my career and as a manager and as a leader is always around just focus on what we can do and the differences that we can make right here, right now. We absolutely will plan for the future, and absolutely we will look at in terms of and with all organisations, ours included, and the same in terms of with Joey, with yourself, is that you know all businesses plan ahead. You know, a minimum of it. You know, 12 months. There's a fly, so I'm not just randomly like doing this. I was like, yeah. So planning ahead. So looking at in terms of where and what do we want to do in 6 months' time, 12 months' time. We always try to look on roughly around sort of almost sort of up to 2 years in terms of and the forward planning of what we're going to do. That's in our sector, but that's how I've personally always worked with all of the different businesses across the hospitality sector that I've always worked with, is looking at your short term, your medium term, and your long term goals. And changes is a massive part of that, because all of the changes that happen worldwide, and there's so many things that are just so beyond our control. But having a good insight into and keeping up to date in terms of your professional development of what's happening across the world. So if there are major storms in a certain place and therefore the cost of food might go up for certain products, it's really important to be able to understand that. And that's not just if you're going to be a chef, but in terms of if your goal is to be a general manager for the future, of really understanding what the trends are and what it is that people want and what are looking for. A key change that will be happening right now across a number of hotels across London, where we both work, but and I also work up and down the country. I'm seeing the same things, whereby is for hotels that rely solely on conferences and events. Well, that's all on hold at the moment. So it's a new model. How can we change that? How can we change our service style? How can we change the product that we've got on offer? And everything throughout this model doesn't only apply to our own employees and the people that we work alongside, our colleagues, but sometimes it's the changes it's changing our external, our clients and their opinions of what do they want to do. So constantly, now in terms of most recently, more people do things like for Zoom, and I can't even tell you what this platform is called. I've not used this one before. What's this? No. Microsoft Teams and all the other. By the way, this isn't an advert for those. So if it
is a new way of working, isn't it? It's learning to work in a new way.
Yeah, absolutely, and just constantly looking in terms of, and again, how we can evolve and make sure that like I say, it's not sometimes the actual changes are forced upon us, which it's not always necessarily what you want to do as an organization, but actually what other people in this, across the world. So in terms of for big conferences and big events, is now's the time where general managers are really starting to look at the fact that, okay, right, well, how can we make sure that we still do that? And I was talking to a GM only earlier on this week, and he was saying to me the fact of what they've always done, which was sits well in terms of with their model, is around the fact that they've always treated every single event, no matter how big or how small, like a wedding, because it has to be made as a real special event. And so they're still getting a lot of the repeat business now from people who are coming back because they've given something that's unique. Whereas in some businesses where it's just a case of there's a meeting of 10 or a meeting of 20, especially in worldwide travel, a lot of business now kind of are asking those questions. Well, do we need to travel as much now? Because
you don't.
Through technology. So it's coming up with, and I think now during your studies, these are the times to explore all of those different things and to get into that mindset of, when you get into an exec level or senior management level, you really want to be able to add value to not just what's happening within the business now, but looking in terms of how you can add and always predicting what some of the changes are going to be for the future. So that you can put together those business proposals.
And a good leader is something that I call a proud disruptor. They don't mind disrupting the business because they know that they need to do that to make changes for the business. So that's important as well. Not to, when you become leaders, you're going to have to make decisions, and you're going to have to make decisions that are sometimes unpopular. So it's about learning how to build up your resilience. Because to be a good leader, you need to be resilient, and you need to be able to bounce back, from changes that happen. So all the things that Simon has just said, you need to be able to learn how to bounce back and have that positive mindset to be able to bounce back. So successful leaders have to have resilience.
No, and that's that. And again, a really, really good point. I love the fact of that how you managed to move us on and shut me up quite quickly. But I like that. That's good. But yeah, so we were talking then about it. So when you look at the difference between a manager and a leader, and there's lots of examples that I've got. I'm interested. So with Joe, where have you seen sort of like the differences between managers and leaders across the sector, and then that big difference? Because leadership, well, we both know it's so important, but it's also very different to being a manager.
It is, yes. A manager is someone who, directs their employees, follows processes, make sure the sort of day-to-day happen, whereas a leader is someone that has a vision, has someone that inspires people. As I've said, a proud disruptor. They, can make change. And a leader, I would say a manager has a team of employees, a leader has a team of fans. And that's the big difference. People follow leaders, and I'm sure you've probably all done the exercise at university, thinking of who is a good leader and why they're a good leader. What are their good sort of traits, and trying to replicate those. But a good leader is someone who's natural, and you're not trying to copy somebody else's management style. You're looking at your own leadership style, and that comes down to your own personal values as well. So it's a really good exercise to, be open and honest with yourself and think about what you value and what's close to you, because that will shape you as a leader for the future. Self-awareness is another key thing. So being self-aware, and by learning to be self-aware, you need to get feedback from people. Simon already mentioned 360, so you need to get feedback. There's loads of different assessment tools that you can do out there. I'm a facilitator for Insights Discovery. That's a great self-assessment tool. There's hundreds of others out there like Myers-Briggs, and I'm sure as you sort of go into organisations, that's something that lots of organisations do. But it's not about reading that profile that you get and then putting in that drawer. It's about holding your mirror up and saying, do I really do that? How can I change to make myself a better leader? And better leaders don't mind having constructive feedback in terms of criticism, and taking that on board and making those changes. And it's not easy to make a change to yourself. When you know what your flaws are, you have to focus on those.
But it is, you know, and it is also, it's okay. So as you're watching this, and if you kind of think, okay, right, well, in the future, do I want to be a manager or do I want to be a leader? And you don't have to make the choice sort of straight away, because there is a bit of an overlap within the two, but you'll naturally fit into one or the other. And you know, and Joe's hit the nail on the head, because but there's a place for both. You know, we across the sector, we need people to be able to manage short-term goals, to be reactive, to look at planning in terms of for the detail of here and now, and sort of almost sort of think with their head. Whereas then we also then need the leaders in organisations which lead with their heart, and then actually lead people in terms of into the unknown. And I don't know if you've been shown it yet, but there's a video, I can't remember the flipping name of it, it's so annoying, but where you've got there's a guy in the middle of a field, and basically he's the first person that stands up and dances, and everybody else is stood in the middle of this field and no one else is dancing. And then all of a sudden, one other person gets up and dances with him, and then another person, and then another person, and another person, and then all of a sudden, you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of people all dancing together. Now, if you picture that, that basically that's somebody who is leading something, that's got the confidence to build a group of people around them. That person does not have to be the best dancer in the world, and that's the same as in terms of with leaders in our business. It's about, you've got to recognise your own weaknesses, and Joe's so right in terms of with all of the feedback, you know, that enriched feedback will help you in terms of when it comes to change throughout for your business, for moving forward. My ideas are not always the best ideas. Your ideas might not always be the best ideas. It's so important to listen to other people, to get to get that full feedback, but also not to, when you're listening in terms of with feedback, it's being able to work out in terms of is the feedback I'm getting because the people that I'm speaking with just like what we're currently doing and they're afraid of change for the future. So hence it's looking at, right, what are the threats in terms of if we don't change, if we stay doing what we're always doing, but also listening to the fact of that, as a leader and a manager, are you afraid of the fact of, oh, if I change this, then what's going to happen? And sometimes you do have to just take that leap into the unknown and be brave. But stand by your convictions, but don't be, you know, it's really important that we're not arrogant as leaders, because you know, we step into the unknown, you manage the risk, look at in terms of like what's going to be the financial cost of doing it, and then looking at the fact of, okay, right now if I've made this change and I've made this decision, if very quickly it's very apparent that the decision that I've made is wrong, hands up and say that this is not right. But now we need to just look at, however, we still need to change, but have we gone down the wrong route? And in which case, right now, let's just change the pathway. So I think it's important. Just don't. I think it's rather than being stubborn with what we've always done. And that's like I say, where I like. I always say the same thing. I always consider myself that I've never actually worked for anybody, because I work with people that I enjoy working with, who allow me to explore different ideas, but also that will rein me in, because as you can even gather by this, I will go on and on forever. However, it's really important to know in terms of, and you've got to understand yourself, and that will help you in terms of with managing and leading change.
And it's about seeing that bigger picture, isn't it? As a leader, you'll be able to see that bigger picture. I call it like the toilet roll syndrome. So, you know, if you're like got two toilet rolls and you're looking through, you know, you're not seeing the bigger picture. So it's really important to see that bigger picture as a leader. Definitely.
Cool. There's a couple of other theories that you might want to. So, and again, I just had a look at just purely, and again, just for your notes, guys.
You mentioned threats earlier, so I automatically thought of SWOT analysis.
Yeah. So you've got Kurt Lewin's leadership styles. That might be something that you guys want to have a look at. Hersey and Blanchard's situational leadership. And we were talking about this yesterday in terms of around, and the other thing. So I'm conscious in terms of for time, so just I mean, if it's all right with you, Joe, we were talking about. So I think the next sort of part that we would like to sort of just sort of go over with you guys is around sort of situational leadership, emotional intelligence, and looking at how that affects in terms of with change as well.
Yeah.
So I think that for when we start to look at, so for situational leadership, it's really important that there's a huge place for situational leadership across all organizations, but then it's recognizing the different sections. So have you got someone who in your organization where it's okay just to be able to delegate out tasks to that person, and actually because they're confident and they've got the skill set to be able to do that. Then you've got to then think within your organization, if you've got 6 people who are doing the same job role, is being conscious that you're not always, just because someone's good at doing something, that you're not always giving the same job to the same people. You've got people who you will need to support. You've got people who you need to coach that might not be willing, that don't like, or it might just be that they're not capable of doing something. It doesn't necessarily mean they won't be capable in the future. But then you've also got to recognise, and I think that when it comes to sort of to changes, is that I might love to play football on the weekends. I'm never going to play for England. I don't actually play football, but it's a bad scenario. But I hope you get the idea, is that sometimes within the organisations, depending on the direction of travel, we need to make sure we put the support, we need to put the coaching in place for our employees. But then if you're faced with a lot of resilience, and if you're faced with people who are really struggling in terms of with the change, and I'm not talking about emotionally, I'm just talking in terms of the fact that if there's not the capability, then that's where all of a sudden, and it sounds awful, but that's where businesses have to make tough decisions to make sure you've got the right people to move your business forward.
Yeah, and certainly one size does not fit all. It's a case of as a leader or a manager, you're sort of being flexible towards your team. I've just seen that pop up at the bottom about encouraging your team. So it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning about listening to your team. So making sure that you have your team briefings, making sure that you have your team meetings, making sure during those meetings it's not all one-way communication and it's two-way communication, making sure that you might have a staff consultative committee, so make sure that everyone knows who the reps are within the organisation, and that they can go and talk to them so that they can raise things within the staff consultative committee. If you've got newsletters, etc., make sure they're accessible for everybody. So communication is key in encouraging and taking your lead teams forward during times of change. And also not being dismissive, because Simon's stress might be different to my stress, and I might think, oh, what's he stressing about that for? But you need to listen to people. A lot of organisations did return to work questionnaires before people came back after lockdown, and that really helped iron out or identify issues that were there and that needed to be addressed.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's treat each person individually, so it's part of your emotional intelligence. And again, this will be part of your studies, and if not, definitely research it, because it's about just understanding that each person is individual. And I used to work for Whitbread, and the main brand that I worked with was TGI Fridays, and they had some wacky theories that would go around the different things. But the way that was always described was around duck farming. At the beginning, I was like, what do you mean duck farming? But it's true. So if you look at a field full of ducks, they all look the same, but every single one of those ducks has got an individual personality, different things that person that duck is sort of going through. So that's again in how weird my mind works, but that would be the same in terms of a big group of people. Everybody's individual. Everybody has something that's going on in the background. There are some people who would be very open and honest and want to talk straight away about what's going on. But as Joseph, when we look at that within the organisations that you work for, if you're lucky enough to work with a big organisation where you've got support services around you, make sure you use the support services around you, because if you're lucky enough that they've got a big HR department, utilize your HR department. Don't shy away from our own. We should never ever shy away from our own responsibilities, but make sure that in organisations, experts are employed because they're experts. So Joe, for example, is an HR consultant, so maybe in a smaller organisation where they don't have a HR department, they use that expertise to support their business, and as future managers and leaders to take the industry forward, which is what you guys are, and that you will be in the future. The only other bit that I think in terms of with for looking after, and especially with looking after for stress and supporting with your teams, is utilize all of the people around you. Don't feel that you have to be the expert on everything, but really stop, listen, and don't just listen to what people are saying, but actually try to hear exactly what they're saying as well. Because I think sometimes when you can listen, you can be like, yeah, but it's too easy to kind of think. But now we need to move on. We need to stop. We need to pause and really be able to understand that. And mental health that's a whole different topic that we could end up talking about. But a change that for new managers moving forward that's not something that in the next couple of years it won't be new. That is going to be part of business. That's going to be part of what you need to be able to understand.
Well, in organisations now, they have mental health awareness training and mental health first aiders. So that shows the sort of shift in change of mindset in terms of understanding about mental health and how it impacts on a team.
Cool.
Fantastic. That's actually answered a lot of the questions that we had before the webinar, so that's fantastic. And I love what you're saying about kind of listening to the individual. And I suppose from all of these webinars that we've done over the summer, it's been constantly about, we love hospitality because it's all about people, and the same reason why it's challenging is the reason why we love it, because we're dealing with people every single day. And I think that's quite a nice place to end that. Thank you both so much for your time today. I hope everyone at home or wherever you're watching this has thoroughly enjoyed. On
the beach.
About this, on the beach, that'd be lovely.
Lots more.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I think it's time to say goodbye. So goodbye everyone at home.
Bye.
And thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.